For decades, the playbook for developing countries seemed pretty simple, right? If you want to get rich, just open your doors to foreign investment. It was sold as this golden ticket, a surefire way to get money, technology, and jobs. But what if that golden ticket was sometimes a bait and switch? What if the very thing that was supposed to save an economy was actually, well, trapping it? Today, we're going to dig into something called the ownership trap and the hidden dangers of foreign capital. Okay, so let's get real for a second. Think about Nigeria. For generations, foreign giants have been drilling for oil there, yet the country has hardly any of its own refineries. Or look at Mexico. You've got these massive, gleaming car factories building vehicles for the whole world, but where's the Mexican Toyota? There isn't one. Instead, local companies are kind of stuck making the screws and plastic parts. You see the pattern here, right? Foreign money flows in, but local industry just stalls. So why does this keep happening? To really get what this trap is, you first got to understand the promise. Back in the 80s and 90s, the big idea was that foreign investment was a cure-all. I mean, the message to developing nations was crystal clear. Just open up, these big multinational companies will bring the cash, the jobs, and all the cool tech you need to get rich. It was treated as the absolute gospel of globalization. No questions asked.
But that promise? Well, it often fell flat. And this is exactly where that lifeline can turn into a cage. So let's break down what we mean by the ownership trap.
So what is the ownership trap? Basically, it's when a country gets so hooked on foreign money that it kind of forgets how to build things for itself. The economy gets really, really good at doing the simple, low-paid tasks for these global giants, but it never learns how to become a giant itself. It's like being a permanent apprentice who never, ever gets to be the master.
So how does this whole thing actually work? Well, it's not some secret plot. It's just business. First off, multinational companies guard their secret sauce, their patents, their designs, their special processes. All that valuable knowledge stays locked away inside their high-tech factories, totally separate from the local economy. And then these huge companies can accidentally just crush the local competition. There was actually a study in Venezuela that found when foreign firms moved in, the local firms in that same sector got less productive. They just couldn't keep up. And the result? The country becomes a world-class expert at assembling someone else's ideas. And the ironic part of all this? Today's economic giants, like the US and Japan, they built their own success using the exact strategies they now tell everyone else not to use. They were masters of strategic protectionism using foreign money, but on their own terms. But then, in the 1980s, the rules of the game totally changed. The new mantra was, open your doors, no exceptions, no conditions. By 1995, the World Trade Organization basically locked this into place. These rules, like the one called TRIMS, made it illegal to force foreign companies to buy local parts, which was a classic way to build up your own local suppliers. So, in effect, the ladder that the rich countries had used to climb up was pulled up right behind them. And this whole shift created two very, very different paths. To see the results in action, all we have to do is look at the difference between East Asia and Latin America. In East Asia, countries like South Korea basically played chess. They demanded joint ventures, which forced companies to share their technology. They protected their own domestic champions, like Hyundai, until they were strong enough to compete on their own. Now, in a lot of Latin America, the strategy was more like opening the floodgates. Countries like Brazil and Mexico just let foreign giants come in and dominate key sectors, which often pushed their own local firms into the background.
And the long-term outcomes? Wow, they couldn't be more different. East Asia's strategy of controlling its own destiny allowed it to graduate from being an imitator to an innovator, building these world-class companies. Meanwhile, many Latin American economies stayed dependent, exporting raw materials and assembling products, which left them really vulnerable to the next global shock. The latter was there, but one region was busy building its own, while the other was kind of stuck on the bottom rung of someone else's.
Okay, so this whole regional comparison thing is pretty compelling, but is it just a nice story? Or does the cold, hard data, looking at the entire globe over decades, actually back up the existence of an ownership trap? Let's take a look at the numbers. The results are, they're pretty shocking. For low-income countries, the more of their economy that was foreign-owned back in 1980, the poorer they were 40 years later. The data showed that for every single extra percentage point of foreign ownership, a country's long-term growth was dragged down by 1.3%. A number like that just turns decades of economic advice completely on its head. The lifeline was acting like an anchor. Just look at the tale of two countries back in 1980.
You had Chile, which was the darling of foreign investors, right? Over a third of its entire economy was foreign-owned. And then you had China, which was almost completely sealed off from the world. According to this study's model, that one single difference in 1980 set them on radically different paths for the next 40 years.
This right here is the very definition of the middle income trap. It's when a country gets just good enough to escape real poverty, but not advanced enough to achieve real wealth. Heavy foreign ownership can lock an economy into what it's already good at, like assembly or mining. It perfects being a cog in someone else's machine, but it never learns how to design the machine itself. It gets stuck as the world's workshop, not its engineering lab.
So, if just opening the doors is a trap, does that mean building walls is the answer? Well, the research says absolutely not. The solution isn't isolation. It's about being strategic. It's about reclaiming control. So, how can countries get strategic? Well, here's a kind of toolkit. First, you can force partnerships. Requiring joint ventures means local firms get a seat at the table and they get to learn the skills. Second, you can build local ecosystems. Mandating that foreign firms use local parts forces them to invest in a domestic supply chain. Third, you've got to be a picky gatekeeper. Scrutinize foreign takeovers and only say yes to the ones that bring something genuinely new and beneficial. And finally, you have to be a smart guide. Steer that investment towards sectors that actually need help, not the ones where it's just going to wipe out the local players. You know, at the end of the day, this isn't just about economic policy or spreadsheets. It's about something way more fundamental. Like this quote says, it's about the freedom to choose one's own path. The tools we just talked about aren't just economic levers. They're instruments of sovereignty. They give a nation the power to decide its own future, rather than having global markets decide it for them.
And let me be clear, this is not an argument against globalization. Far from it. It's an argument for a smarter, more balanced globalization, one where developing countries have what's called policy space to build up their own unique strengths. The goal is to graduate from just being a source of cheap labor to becoming an equal partner at the global table of innovation. Because, let's face it, a world with more innovators, not fewer, is a richer and more resilient world for all of us.
So we're left with this really fundamental question. For decades, the big assumption was that what's good for global capital is automatically good for everyone. The evidence we're seeing now suggests it's just not that simple. This whole debate isn't really about investment. It's about control. Who gets to write a nation's destiny? Is it the investors who are chasing the highest possible return? Or is it the people who are trying to build a lasting home? The answer to that is going to define development in the 21st century.